Good morning. Make sure the volume. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to our IT, I think we're going to have a little smoother transition on these microphones than the wireless microphones yesterday. Some of you that were here and saw that, we had to go through a checklist to make sure that we didn't have the feedback. So with these wired in mics, we should be better. But I do want to caution everyone, please, if you're walking around, look at the hard wires that are here. We don't need a trip and fall here. So, but again, thank you for being here. We had a great meeting yesterday. I know some of you were in attendance. A lot of you maybe have watched online. It was interesting to hear from industry, and I think the need of this of workforce that we're specifically trying to hone in on is very much was backed up and confirmed with our industry partners, and I think that was very relevant. It was commercial, it was our manufacturing sector, and it was general aviation, and so it was across the board. And the comments were and the presentations were very informative. And the other part of this is that aviation is important to Georgia as an industry, and it's not just isolated in Atlanta versus the rest of the state, as we often see issues here. This is an important part of Georgia's economy, exports, and it's a state issue. And so with that being said, we've sort of walked through, hey, and confirmed the need. Now I want to talk about from our higher education perspective, how are we stepping up to meet that need? What are we doing? We've had our visits. We visited the USG, Middle Georgia State, and we were able to visit two of our, I think, 5 technical college programs, and sort of try to get an idea of what is going on these campuses, and also sort of dig in from a budget point of view, cost, and what it takes to run the program. Getting a better idea, because I think these programs, like probably healthcare and a lot of other areas, they're inherently more complicated. They're inherently more expensive to get a successful curriculum and program in place, as it is especially under these FAA certified programs. And that's what I wanted to focus on today. And I told the group yesterday, it sort of got off, but I want to look at some buckets. We're all producing from both USG and TCSG aviation and a lot of other areas. And I want to talk about that, but I want our focus to be on these FAA certificate programs. And again, I'm just to say it, we've got some overlay with the USG and the technical college system. And I want to make this statement. I want to make it very clear. We're not here to compete with each other. We have an overlay in this, and you guys are serving the needs of Georgia, specifically the aviation industry. And we're here to see what we can do to grow it and to make sure that we're putting more resources, looking at these programs and seeing what we need to do, either as the General Assembly or how we examine this, and a report comes out that says, hey, we need to look at this and we can improve the output of this workforce that is so very needed across the state. And I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again. The whole ecosystem is great in Georgia, and it goes all the way, from manufacturing, aerospace, and a lot of the other issues. But I still think the heart of aviation right now is that if an aircraft is not airworthy, and that is an FAA metric that says either it can fly or it can't fly, nothing else matters. And if you don't have pilots to fly them, they can be airworthy, but they're sitting on the ground. They do no good. And I think that's sort of the lens that I want to look through first. And I know we've got some other issues out there as aviation, and we don't want to ignore them. We want to make sure we're fulfilling those needs of industry. But these two things are what I've been trying to hone in on and focus on. And so, I don't want to mix things up. There's some other needs. And I know we've got some folks from Georgia Tech, and I'm not sure who else from other institutions here. There's a lot of need in the aerospace aviation industry. And we're hearing about those. And I think those could be some conversations that we need to continue. But again, this focus that we have been specifically trying to meet, I think, some basic workforce needs that I think are the underpinning of aviation in Georgia. So with that being said, I am so grateful that our technical colleges and our USG, our college, Middle Georgia State, which has got the premier university aviation program, and then our TSG that's got their 5 aviation programs across the state are here. And we want to have a frank discussion. I know sometimes that's difficult within the politics of everything, but I think unless we can really have frank discussions and figure out where we're at, how can we help, what do we need to do to help to produce and meet the needs of the workforce, we won't get anywhere. So with that, we're going to start. What I'm going to ask to do is we've got presentations. And so we're going to go through these presentations. And if we'll hold our questions, write your questions down. And after all of the presentations, we're then going to have just a very frank, upfront, roundtable discussion. And I want to make sure that we're hearing from the institutions, at each of these campuses of, hey, here's what's really going on the front lines, boots on the ground. Here's what we're seeing within the industry. Here's how we're doing great things. Here's how we can do better things. And we'll go from there. So the first on the agenda will be Middle Georgia. Aiden Clark, he's the dean of the School of Aviation there. So, Aiden, if you'll come up these are the mics at the table will be like our round table discussion. But if you're presenting a program, if you'll come up to the end where Morgan is, she'll help get your presentation pulled up, and if you'll speak from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about this issue. Just jump right in and get started here. The first slide, I'm not going to belabor this point because you guys talked about it a lot yesterday, but what I will highlight here is that, 2008, 208,000 pilots and 192,000 technicians by 2039. The only reason I want to highlight that is pre-COVID, those numbers were lower than that. So a lot of people think that with COVID and the slowdown that you guys discussed a little bit yesterday, that it's had a severe impact. It has had a severe impact, but the projections are still there for the workforce needs. And how that translates to Georgia is a 5.9% increase by 2019 or 2029. 2,400 net jobs per year. That is more than we and our colleagues at the technical college are currently producing. So there's already a shortage. There's going to be, there's an expected increase in that shortage over the coming years. So at Middle Georgia State, we're one of only 9 universities in the U.S. that operate a maintenance Part 147 program, a 4-year degree Part 141 flight training program, and an air traffic control program. Now, we offer other programs at Middle Georgia State University, but those are the 3 pillars that we focus on at Middle Georgia State University. The great thing about our students at Middle Georgia State University is they live in this aviation ecosystem where they're exposed to all aspects of aviation. You might have an aircraft mechanic living in the dorms with a pilot live with an air traffic controller. So they all learn from each other and they feed off of each other. It's a pretty intensive program. Those numbers that are up there from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and they're very specific to commercial airlines. The bottom number is a commercial airline number, and on the left for aircraft maintenance, and then the 16970 is the median annual for an airline pilot. And then the FAA certified air traffic controller, the median is 130. These numbers kind of speak for themselves. It just shows the breakout of our graduates from Middle Georgia State University School of Aviation. 57.4% are flight and aviation management, 38.3% are aviation maintenance and structural technology, and then 4.3% are air traffic control. One thing I'll highlight about air traffic control, it used to be a much larger program, and then the FAA changed the way they did the hiring process. We worked through our congressional delegation, got some help, and through the FAA Reauthorization Act, they were able to bring back the hiring practices for CTI schools, which has in turn kind of turned that program around for us. These are some of our partners. We have many partners that aren't listed, but these are key partners. Some we have, most of these we have official agreements with, some kind of unofficial. They hire a lot of our graduates. Obviously Delta Propel and the Delta Tech Ops, we're very proud of that partnership. Gulfstream hires a lot of our graduates, and we'll talk about Gulfstream in a little bit when we get into the philanthropic slide. NavAir, General Kubinick, retired General Kubinick was on yesterday, was talking about Robins Air Force Base and the partnership that they have. NavAir is basically the Navy side of, that's like depot, they supply technicians for depot level Navy maintenance. They're very active on our campus. We actually see NavAir more active on our campus than Robins Air Force Base. We're very engaged with Robins Air Force Base. We have a lot of graduates that work there, not just in the aviation maintenance, but across the spectrum at Middle Georgia State University. We supply a lot of people to Robins Air Force Base for the employment opportunities there. But just think it's interesting to note that NavAir, which a lot of those kids go to, I mean, they go all over, but a lot of them go to Jax Naval Air Station, I think up to Virginia, all over. So we serve 101 out of 159 counties, School of Aviation wise. So if you look at the map, the darkened purple colors there, those are our counties that we serve. On the left, you'll see the top 10 counties by number in order of highest to lowest on the top 10 there from the left side. The flight program, we have 85 out of 159 counties. That's 600 plus in-state students. Total of 700 plus in-state School of Aviation wide. On the maintenance side of the house, we service 41 of the 159 counties, and also out of state as well. I think that this slide, it's important to note on this slide that, you know, I think you guys had, Amy Hudnall had the slide yesterday where it showed the clusters of aerospace industries. And if you look at this map, we're servicing those cluster areas from Middle Georgia State University. It also highlights the economic impact of Georgia. We're going to be talking about budgets throughout this process, and as the budget relates to not just the university system, but the technical college system as well. Subsidizing these aviation programs, while it may be a high ticket number on one side, the ROI is there. You've got these are higher than average wage earners that graduate Middle Georgia State University, as well as the TCSG A&P programs there. So the return on investment is there. These graduates, for the most part, are living and working in the state of Georgia. And I've got a slide that'll show where our alumni are working. We're proud of our diversity at Middle Georgia State University. Minorities represent 38% of the enrollment at the School of Aviation. Nationally, it's 20% at air traffic controllers, 21% at aircraft maintenance, and 7% of pilots. So we're helping to bridge that gap there. Same thing on the women in aviation. Women in aviation represent 14% of the enrollment at the School of Aviation, and you can see the national makeup there. Air traffic controllers were a little under that, as 22%, but you see it's 5% on the aircraft maintenance and 6% on the pilot side. So once again, when we talk about shortages in this field, you've got to make sure that you're diversifying your students in order to get there. You're not going to get there with the traditional workforce. In the past, the airlines and the aviation industry has relied on getting a lot of retired military folks or former military folks. Well, they're not even producing enough now. So we've got to diversify this field to get to where we need to be. This just goes to feeding the workforce, and it just shows our graduation numbers there. On the aviation maintenance technology, that's our airframe and power plant program. When we list a graduate, that is airframe and power plant combined. That's not airframe and then power plant. It's a combined unduplicated number. So the 14, 27, and 41 for the AAS, those are students that completed their airframe and power plant certification, as well as the Associate of Applied Science. On the next line where it says 39 for the total, those are total students that completed the combined airframe and power plant certificate program. We also have a program, the avionics install course. It's an avionics electrical install course. I believe Gulfstream mentioned that need yesterday. We initially had a full-blown avionics program. Well, industry really needs people that can do the install and troubleshoot work. Boxes are typically removed from an aircraft, sent back to a station where they'll be repaired. What industry told us is we need people to be able to do the electrical avionics install. We need people to be able to troubleshoot. So we have an elective course that we run in a semester, and it's an intensive 4-week program, and it goes to a complete avionics install, and we teach all the different termination processes: Airbus, Boeing, Gulfstream, Lockheed. That program typically has no less than 10 students in it every time we offer. I think the last time we offered, I believe Martin told me it was 24 students this past summer. So that is that's in addition to our FAA airframe and power plant program. They're not counted as a graduate there when they complete that course. It's an elective course, which gives them additional skills that makes them more attractive and more beneficial to the airlines, to Epps Aviation or Gulfstream or wherever they choose to work. Same thing with aircraft assembly work. That is covered within the curriculum of our aircraft structural technology program. A lot of those graduates go to work at Gulfstream, Lockheed, Boeing, Airbus. The numbers on the flight side of the house, those are the flight numbers are, you'll see the total there for the last 2 years, 79 flight graduates, 64 in the management program. And then our other aviation graduates encompass our Bachelor of Applied Science program. So those numbers, if you notice, those numbers are during the COVID pandemic as well. Those numbers stayed pretty strong for us. We had a hiccup. We were shut down for about a month, and then we started back operations, and we've been full bore since then. So this kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier. This slide shows where our graduates are living and working. So of the respondents of our survey, 80% of those are living and working within 100 miles of Macon. That goes back to my point of the economic impact. These folks are graduating our programs. They're going to work in the state of Georgia. They're contributing to the revenue of the state of Georgia. And that's all throughout the state. Our graduation rates, 51% on the flight side of the house. And we do a lot of comparisons to University of North Dakota. We don't compare ourselves to Embry-Riddle because they're a private institution and they're funded privately. You see their graduation rate is 51.5%. I know that seems like a low number, but there's a lot of factors involved in calculating those numbers. Number one, if you come into a program as a new first-time full-time student, and then you transition out of that program to another program, you don't complete the program you're in, that affects our graduation rates in that program. The other thing is you guys discussed yesterday, and we'll talk about today, the cost of it, which I'll go into a little more depth here in a little bit, but the cost of the program will cause students to drop out. The other issue is academically. I mean, a lot of people think flying an airplane is cool, and it is, but there's a lot of academic work that goes into getting into the aircraft to fly. So we're proud of our graduation rates there. Same thing on the aviation maintenance technology side of the house. These programs are not for everybody, but for those that come through and calculate. So on the 49% on the AMT, if we have a student that starts in the associate's degree program and then decides to change to the certificate program, they don't count toward our graduation rate. They count as a graduate for us, but they don't count toward our graduation rate because of the way it's calculated. And we'll have a lot of students that will come in the associate's degree program, and then they realize, hey, I can finish my airframe and power plant, because they can do it all at the same time, finish their airframe power plant certification, go to work, and then they can come back and continue their associate's degree or their bachelor's degree. And that's available fully online if they don't want to come back to the campus. So those are our flight graduates. We have a better track record of tracking our flight graduates, because those graduates, they're a little more responsive than our AMT graduates. 95.6% job placement rate there. On the maintenance side of the house, and Martin and I had this discussion, and we can talk about it a little bit in the roundtable, but Martin and I had the discussion of the students that we know of that we've been able to track. The job placement rate is very high. There's just a lot of unknowns. If I give you a legitimate job placement rate, we're probably at 68%, somewhere around there in the 60 percentile. It's just because we have a lot of unknowns. So those are true, honest numbers. Of the ones we've been able to track, they're working. They're all working. Cost by program here. If you'll see, our certificate program is $10,514. That's for the airframe and power plant. The associate's degree is $13,546. So I'll talk about those numbers a little bit. Those numbers, that's if you're paying fully out of pocket. Our programs at Middle Georgia State University are just like the technical college. They're eligible for the HOPE grant as well. Now, if they're in the associate's degree, then it goes under the HOPE scholarship. But if they're in the certificate, they fall under the HOPE grant. And that covers the vast majority of their tuition. Air traffic control, the cost there for it is $12,386. And then the flight cost is the substantial cost. You see that number is $78,375. That is a significant cost. And you can look at the cost breakdown. You guys all should have a handout that kind of outlines where we fall compared to the other universities that we discussed earlier. For our costs associated with flight training. It is a large ticket item, but compared to other universities, it's very affordable. And that brings me back to the point that I made earlier. Obviously, we're subsidized by the state, but that being subsidized by the state makes this an option for a lot of people that otherwise, when they see a price tag of $250,000, they will immediately turn around and leave. 78,000 is a lot of money, but it's a lot more digestible than 250,000 or 200,000. So they can use the HOPE scholarship for tuition in that area, Pell money, and then there's a lot of student loans available and scholarships available as well. By us having that state subsidizing process, it makes this an attainable goal for everybody. Not just those people that have parents that work at Delta or parents that have money. It makes it an attainable goal for everybody. We do a lot of partnerships and work with colleges and career academies. I sit on the board at Hutchings College Career Academy in Macon, and those students never, they literally, when they look up in the sky and they see an airplane, it's literally an out of reach goal for them. It never even computes that that's a career field for them. But by getting into the schools and establishing these partnerships with college and career academies throughout the state, we're able to kind of change that tide. We also run summer camps during the summer for middle schoolers, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They talked a little bit about kind of marketing and how we can get the word out. And I agree, you have to get the word out at an earlier age to kind of start building those blocks, you know, setting the foundation for students to kind of see aviation as a possible career field. So there's a lot of work that we do throughout the state with K-12, our summer camp, working diligently to make sure that it's not only students see it as an option, but it's an affordable option for them. And this goes back to what I was just talking about, subsidization and support by the state of Georgia. That you see from 2014, that is the funding that we've received. The vast majority of that has gone to grow our fleet. We'll talk about our fleet size in a minute, but you know, we're currently at around just shy of 700 flight students. We'll talk about that in a minute on a slide, but we would be, and we're still well short of where we need to be to support those 700 flight students and to grow beyond that. But without these state dollars, we would still be sitting at around 200 flight students, 150, actually would be probably at about 100 to 150 flight students. So this has enabled us to grow and expand our Eastman operations. We also have a great arm at the university that does a lot of philanthropic outreach. We have several partners. The one at the top, Lance Tolan, he paid for our accreditation, our Aviation Accreditation Board International, which is an expensive accreditation process for us, but that is one of those accreditations that Delta and other companies feel like it's an important step for us. And we learned a lot about ourselves going through the ABI accreditation. So we appreciate the financial support there. Gulfstream has been a great friend to the university. I think, Martin, we've gotten grants for the last 5 or 6 years from Gulfstream, which help fund equipment, specialized equipment for our aviation maintenance technology program in order to be able to keep up with the changing industry needs. So we appreciate all our supporters. Henry Lowe that's on there, he's probably our oldest supporter. He dates all the way back to our days as part of the technical college system. So he's been a great friend to the university over the years. So we've discussed this when you guys visited the campus. We have a lot of challenges recruiting and retaining faculty. So when you talk about public sector versus private sector compensation, obviously we're not going to compete with Delta Airlines in salaries. That's not what we're trying to get to. But what we're trying to get to is an attractive salary. I believe, was it Dan from EPS yesterday? Talked a little bit about why people may work at EPS versus the airlines, or why they may want to work at the airlines. Well, there's a whole host of factors involved, as everybody in this room knows, in your career field. The airlines are great, but they're not great for everybody. You know, being part of the education world, I was working for the airlines when I got involved in education. I was working for United Airlines and started teaching part-time, and I fell in love with it. I enjoy teaching. You know, it's a little cliche giving back to the field that's given so much to me, but I've been in aviation my whole life. I was one of those fortunate people who my dad and granddad were involved in aviation. So it was a goal for me. But when you talk to kids that have never had any interest or involvement in aviation, they don't know about it. So being in education kind of gives us that opportunity. And quite frankly, without us and TCSG, the second largest industry in Georgia by some estimates would suffer greatly. So we need to figure out a way to get our compensation where it's attractive to folks. Like I said, we're not going to compete with Delta. But if we can get it there are other benefits for working in the education system. Geographic diversity, you know, we're located in rural Georgia. That presents some challenges for recruiting faculty, but on the flip side of that, flight training in rural Georgia can't be beat. You know, we're very efficient getting on and off the ground there, as opposed to if we were operating out of PDK or some busy airport throughout the state of Georgia. Gives us a lot of flexibility there, but it does present some challenges in recruiting faculty there. growth and capacity. We're currently at 52 aircraft. We got 48 fixed wing and 4 rotary helicopters. And you see our capacity numbers there. I want to highlight the AMT capacity. The capacity is listed at 150. Our actual FAA capacity is 200. We're at 196 there. The 150 is based on when we talk about growth, we want to talk about controlled growth. We recently went through a pretty rough patch with we had a huge increase in enrollment over a short period of time. And that was based on a whole lot of factors, but the aviation industry as a whole was growing. Delta Propel, when you talk about marketing, us being part of Delta Propel and the Delta Tech Ops program, that has opened a lot of doors and put us on the stage with a lot of other institutions. Delta Propel has increased our interest in our flight program. So we had a lot of growing pains, a lot of influx in students. Well, our flight instructors, most of our flight instructors are our graduates. They graduate from our flight program. They talked about a little bit yesterday about how they get to the airlines through the Delta Propel program or whichever route they choose. They have to build their flight hours. So when they build their flight hours, they can do it in a number of ways, but a lot of people do it as a flight instructor. So they'll graduate, they'll get their certified flight instructor rating, and then they'll turn around and become an instructor for us. And they'll fly with us for however long they need to get to their 1,000 hour. We're approved. They talked about the restricted ATP. You have to have 1,500 hours unless you graduate from a FAA approved restricted ATP program, which we are, which allows our graduates to go to work at 1,000 hours versus 1,500 hours. So that controlled growth, we were handling a large number of flight students with a small number of graduate flight instructors. As those larger numbers graduate, we've been able to kind of stem the hemorrhaging there from the waiting list for flight. So we don't want to outgrow that. When you start flying, you need to be flying regularly. If you go a long period without flying, you have to do a lot of reorientation flights, and it just takes longer to get there. So want to talk about controlled growth. You see our wait list there, 441 on the flight side, 46 on the maintenance side. We're turning students away when we would not like to, but if we take them, we can't give them the quality training that we see. We could open the doors and accept everybody, but then you're not getting quality education and training. You're just funneling them through a pipeline, giving them the fire hose treatment in one end and out the other, and you're not really concerned with the quality of training. And and our colleagues at the technical college system are the same way. Everybody in the aviation industry will tell you quality is the key to success. That's why aviation is as safe as it is. And then our last slide here, our Eastman Hub Growth. We presented a plan to the University System of Georgia. The University System of Georgia has been very supportive of us, as Middle Georgia State University has been supportive of the School of Aviation. One thing that we have to take into consideration USG wide and MGA wide is we have a lot of other needs other than aviation. So when we go every year to ask for small caps or large cap projects, we have to prioritize within the institution. The institution has to decide what's important to them. And then we submit those our top priorities to USG. And then USG has a whole host of institutions that have their top priorities, and then they have to prioritize that way. We've gotten tremendous support. This was submitted. It's not on the current docket for a capital project this year, but we're hoping to be able to grow Eastman. We're poised to do that, which will allow us to start accepting more students and be able to get them in the front door and out the back door in a timely manner. And it's got you can see the total price tag there. That's a large ticket item, but it goes back to what I talked about earlier. These graduates they earn higher than the average wage. They return money to the state of Georgia. In the long run, it's a great investment for the state of Georgia in the aerospace industry. That's my last slide. So
Thank you. I And again, we'll save questions, but I think everyone will agree. I'm looking for a quote, and I think this applies to everyone that's here as far as the importance of what we do in aviation. I'm trying to find my my quote here. I said this up in when we had our visit in Northwestern. Aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. And so when you've got lives at stake, that's the importance of what these programs, and that's why those stringent oversight of FAA and from our A&P programs to our flight, we have people's lives. So there's, you think about that, what other professions have that in their that life, somebody's life on the line, and you go to think of other things, but medical profession, physicians and all, but I think people don't associate that with flight. And that's the quality that I think we've got within our programs here in Georgia. And that's what we want to keep, not only keep that quality, but we want to grow those programs and keep turning out the best workforce that we can within aviation, especially within, making sure that our aircraft are safe. I've always heard, and I don't know what the statistics are, but, each one of us are probably more likely to get in an accident and get killed on the way home this afternoon than we are getting on an airplane and flying across the world. And that's because of exactly what we're talking about here in this workforce that we're trying to look at. So thank you. Next, Tal from Savannah Technical College. Tal, we had a great visit. That was also one of our one of the two technical colleges that we had an opportunity to go and actually tour this year. And again, we appreciate that. That was quite exciting to see what's going on in Savannah and what they're doing.
Appreciate it, Chairman. Again, on behalf of TCSG, the Technical College Systems of Georgia, and of course those with aviation programs, we appreciate having the time to come talk to y'all today about issues and how we can grow the program and what we do for the state of Georgia as well. So sort of an overview of what we're gonna cover today is basically I just want to talk about the history a little bit, just quickly. It's a long history with TCSG. Real quickly about the colleges that do offer aviation programs, those that have the 147, and then some of the additional programs that industry did touch on the other day. Graduate numbers over the last 3 academics year, and then sort of get down into, I know, the nuts and bolts where you want to be, the costs, and a little bit behind the FAA regulations. We keep talking FAA, regulations, but a lot of people don't understand, what are these regulations. So sort of give you a little high view of the regulations that govern and why do we have to do, or why the cost of these programs could be a little bit higher and stuff, because we do have to follow these regulations, the challenges that we have ahead, and then of course our industry partnership. I think industry stressed on that a little bit, but I know us as Savannah Tech and other TCSG schools and the University System of Georgia schools, we would not be where we were today without that industry support that we do get. So we're very thankful for that. History, as you can see, South Georgia Tech was the first school, started back in 1948 there. So back when before it was even the FAA, it was Civil Aeronautical Administration at that time. It wasn't the airframe and power plant at that point in time. It transitioned to that. And of course, they still do have their program. So again, they've been around a long time. As you said, we have gone into 5 technical colleges now that do have FAA Part 147 programs, being Augusta Technical College, Central Georgia Technical College, Georgia Northwestern, Savannah Technical College, and South Georgia Technical College. Just a little side note, Atlanta Tech is working to get back online, so that will add a 6th one there. Also, we do have a sister college, Chattahoochee Technical College, who is in the process of starting to go through design phase and stuff. So a couple of years out, but there will be another program that is in the works and stuff. So you're looking at a total of 7 programs for sure that'd be up and going for the TCSG system, along with Middle Georgia College here. Additional programs that are offered throughout the system. We have our aircraft structural technology, and again, as you notice, we have the only U.S. manufacturer of biz jets in the state of Georgia. For the U.S. It's here in the state of Georgia. So these skill sets are very important to companies like that. I mean, without them, they can't produce an aircraft. And I know a lot of people sometimes don't look at these programs, but these programs here, that student has to go through almost the same stringent guidelines that somebody in our 147, because when you build a plane, at the end of the day, when that plane hits the end of that production line, it's not like building a tractor where, hey, it's only 90% right and it breaks down the field, big deal. When that plane leaves and that customer takes delivery, that plane has to be 100%. When rivets are put in, the millions and millions of rivets that are put in, 100% have to be right. You can't have 99% of the rivets right holding the plane together. 100% of those have to be right. So again, these programs, even though they're not governed by FAA, those students still have to go through the same type of rigor and mindset training to be able to safely build and produce those aircraft so that customer can take delivery, that pilot can safely fly it, and future down the road that it can safely be maintained by aviation maintenance. If you look at our technical colleges, you sort of see, and we saw the clusters the other day, a lot of them fall within where the clusters are. Okay, you got Augusta Technical College. All the ones there are FAA Part 147 programs. So students come in, get anywhere from just a TCC, technical certificate of training, all the way up to an associate's degree there. Central Georgia Tech not only does the 147 programs, which are the first 5 there. They also do aircraft structural diploma, aircraft assembly technician, and a composite technician, which of course being important, as it was talked about from the general today, with Robins Air Force Base right there, being right there in their backyard. So again, they do more than just maintenance on aircraft. They have a lot of structural stuff. So they do support that with that partnership. Georgia Northwestern, being just north of Atlanta here. Atlanta, as we saw, is a big hub for aviation. Again, offering the Part 147 programs that will support those industry partners and stuff. And I know they work very closely with Delta and Epps Aviation there. Savannah Technical College, you can see pretty extensive list. Again, we're located at the heart of the only U.S. manufacturer of biz jets. So within the U.S. here. So there's a lot of skill sets that are needed. Again, with that luxury craft cabinet making, aircraft upholstery and trim. Aiden alluded to it a little bit ago, but the avionics installer, avionics technicians, those are 2 TCCs that we developed, started the summer of academic year 2020. So the very last semester of our 2020 year. Has been a very successful program where we are teaching these students how to properly run and install wires and do things like that in this aircraft and so forth. And from Delta the other day, they talked about the A350 being so modern and all that stuff. Gulfstream's new aircraft that way. But if you go down into new GA aircraft that Epps is working on in those Platypus, into those Cirruses, into a Diamond and stuff, those are all glass pits, cockpits. I mean, when you walk in, it is all computers running those aircraft as well. So again, this is not just an airline where this skill set is needed throughout the whole industry. And the deal you got too is people that do have the older aircraft are upgrading their systems and stuff. So you got to have the skill set, the people that can upgrade these as well. South Georgia Technical College. Again, the first 4 listed there being the Part 147 programs leading to the FAA certification. But you see, again, they offer some of the structural stuff, again, because they support Robins Air Force Base within their service area. Okay. The avionics maintenance technology one has a star there, so at least eligibility for FAA mechanic. That program, the individual will go through, they actually do the general and the airframe portion of the FAA curriculum. and then they do the avionics stuff on the back end. So once they do that general and airframe, they can go ahead and test and get their airframe rating at that point in time. So that's why that is marked off as that leads to a FA certification testing, because they can go ahead and test for their general and their airframe test at that point in time if they do that avionics maintenance technology one. Some graduate numbers for our systems and so forth are unduplicated. And so I know Aiden talks about this and people get wrapped around the axle sometimes, lack of a better word there, is we will have students that come in and do our associates program. And then at same time as they complete and get through the general and the airframe one, they've earned the credit to receive a certificate for the airframe portion. So we'll go ahead and award them that certificate. So the numbers you're seeing up here under like the aviation maintenance, the diploma and stuff, those are what we call duplicated, meaning that person that earned that aviation maintenance technology associate's degree could also have earned that aviation maintenance certificate or the aviation maintenance technician airframe. The big thing I want to point out is at the bottom there, our unduplicated number over these years, we have put out 454 graduates, okay? 454 graduates from our, and these are all for people who get eligible to take the FAA test, okay? So total about 454 students there that have become eligible. That advanced aviation maintenance, advanced aviation technology, TCC, that's something we had developed at Savannah Technical College that we're doing. We'll talk a little bit coming up, and industry did yesterday. People have two ways to get qualified for their test. They either work experience, a lot of times that's military people, or they come through a 147 school. This certificate was developed as a 1 semester certificate for those individuals that have got their sign off, but they just need to gain some of that civilian knowledge to be able to successfully take that test and go to work in industry. So out of this certificate, if you look there, of course, those are duplicated numbers there, but there's 231 people there. We have almost in a 2.5 year period, graduated more people out of that program who have sat and got their A&P than we have out of our 147. So that is a very important program, especially I think to help industry for these guys that are transitioning out of the military and just need to earn their A&P. What's nice about that program too, is it's eligible. They can use GI Bill, they can use TA if they're still in. We have gotten a grant from the state for the past year that actually pays for those individuals' testing fees. So these individuals are typically being able to go through that program at no cost to them and earn their A&P. So again, if you talk about where you have people going to a private institution paying almost $50,000, we're getting that same person that deal at no cost at all for them. A little bit on graduates of our other program, that just splits out our bills. So if you look there, roughly about 71 or so people have gone through that advanced airframe and power plant technology and have earned their A&P certificate and tested for. So again, and about that program's only been around for about 2.5 years. So that's a pretty good throughput that we have had. And again, that's going through the COVID problems and things that we had to deal with during that time. Aircraft structural diploma, you look about 113 students, aircraft assembly technician, 339. Upholstery trim and cabinet making, again, is only taught at Savannah Tech, so 16 and 44. The avionics installer and technician, again, those are brand new. As we said, the avionics installer certificate started first. We started that in a summer term. So really 2021 is the only time we've really had people. So just this past year was a full first year, both our certificates. We put out 49 people on the installer side and 19 people on the technician. And again, we expect those numbers to climb. And again, that is to help the industry there with those modern avionics and that computer stuff that is going on in the aircraft. I tell people, it's important. They have to understand that it's not like working in the housing where if I don't crimp the wire right and I go to plug something in and it doesn't work, okay, I just get an electrician. If we don't crimp a wire right in an aircraft, we get a whole computer system that shuts down in flight when we get to altitude and the plane comes down. So again, there's a whole skill set and mindset we got to get that individual into on how to properly do that correctly. So I know this is always a big question people ask about where do graduates go to work and so forth. So, or how many are leaving to go out of state, how many are staying in state, and so forth. So you can see over the last 3 academic years, and we don't have 2021 data, just like Amy talked about the other day, this lags behind just a little bit on us. But you see, and most of our people stay here in the state of Georgia. As Aiden alluded to, they're getting good jobs. They become a tax-paying citizen of Georgia. They're buying stuff in Georgia, you know, they're supporting the Georgia economy. So most of our people, if you look, stay here in the state of Georgia and go to work and making good money and so forth. You know, straight out of school, I mean, the graduates are making over $50,000. That's pretty good with, you know, anywhere from 7.5 weeks to 2 years worth of training and be able to make that. And most of them are coming out with no debt. So they're not paying off $100,000, $200,000 worth of college debt. So in-state 218 there, out-of-state 15 in 2018. 2019, 276 went to work in state, 11 were out of state. In the academic year 2020, 212 again in state and only 10 out of state. So again, they're staying here in the state of Georgia. They're not leaving, you know, and that's what we find with our students. A lot of students, you know, they are from Georgia. They want to get educated here in Georgia and they want to stay and work in Georgia. So, you know, it's a matter of how do we keep that pipeline, as Chairman has alluded to, how do we get that pipeline filled up there? So a little bit on our tuition and fees and so forth, okay? And I base this off the ones with the stars, like the fees per semester, they will vary a little bit from technical college system to technical college system. So the 321, for example, is what Savannah Tech was. I know at some other schools, their fees might be about 331. And the reason why is some schools in technical college system, Georgia had added sports teams and things like, so the students have other activities and stuff. So, you know, they charge a little bit higher fee because they have other activities and stuff that they're supporting and so forth. So again, but that won't vary a ton there. Tools for the program. So the aviation maintenance program, we require our students to buy a basic hand tool box, okay? And that's going to be needed in a lot of the places they go to work. There are some industry that does provide the tools, but typically when they walk out and they get that first job, they have to have tools to go to work, okay? It's no different than the automotive mechanic hadn't have tools to start working on cars. Same thing for the planes here. So again, they buy those when they go to enter into the program, use throughout, learn how to properly use those. And then once they do get a job, now they're ready to go to work. It's not saying I got a job and now I got to go buy $3,000 worth of tools before I can actually take that job. Books for the program, $250, give or take a little bit. Some schools bundle them. So students buy them all up front. Students get a little bit better discount and stuff if they do that. Some have their students buy it each semester, okay? So that would vary, but roughly around $250. So our total cost per semester for tuition and fees will be $1,821. And the way we get that is we don't charge more than 15 credit hours. So, and typically our students, because of the way the program set it up, are taking 15 credit hours every semester, okay? So there's $1,500 there plus the fees, which is right around $321. And again, most of our programs for the aviation maintenance takes 6 semesters to complete. So we're going to bring in right around $10,926 in tuition and fees over those 6 semesters. Again, pretty good deal compared to when we had people talk about there's institutions out there where it's $50,000 or more for an individual to do the same training. Once you add the tools in and the books, roughly that student for those 2 years of training has $13,876 into their education. Now, one thing, as Aiden alluded to, most of our students are not paying that out of pocket. I would say a very, very small percentage. Most of our students, over 90 or so percent of them, qualify for HOPE grant or the HOPE scholarship and the HOPE career grant, which is some additional money, okay? So that cost comes down. So our students are paying only maybe a couple of hundred, if that much, for each semester, okay? So that comes very low for our students. So it's not like they're paying that. So most of them are getting educated for almost free, if not free. So again, the HOPE grant scholarship, the HOPE career grant that's out there for us is hugely important for our students. So we talk about these programs get people qualified, now they got it. And the industry partners talked about it. They have to go sit and take the exam. There's two ways, to get qualified, either experience or they go through the school. Once they finish with us, we will give them a certificate saying they met all the requirements of 147 and they're eligible to go test. There's 3 written exams that individual will end up having to take. The cost of those written exams right now are $175. Okay. Then, as I talked about, they got to go sit with the DME and take their oral and practical. Depending on where they go, that run them somewhere probably between $600 to $900. Okay, depending on the DME, where he's located, and what is. That's pretty much this cost here in the state of Georgia. That's DME cost. I will let you know, it's very low. You get to the state of Florida and stuff, there are DMEs down there. It's about $3,000 to take the test with them. So the state of Georgia is very reasonable to DMEs in this area, what they're charging. Okay. So the total cost of testing to get certified will run somewhere between $1,125 up to $1,425. And again, the variation there being on what they have to pay for their oral and practical. So by the time you add that cost back into what they have to pay to go through the school with the tooling and stuff, a student will have somewhere between $15,000 to $15,300 to earn their A&P. Now, again, remember, because of our tuitions and fees and a lot of that being covered already by HOPE scholarship grant and the HOPE career grant, the student is really not paying that full amount out of pocket. And again, that's very important, I think, to help out our students. So we always talk about costs, expand capacity, facilities, and so forth. This example here, again, we just pulled our costs. It would vary from school to school, size of facilities, what construction prices are, and things like this. But this is sort of a good deal. Just to let you know, I know Chairman's been through our facility, but we have a 30,000 square foot facility. Okay, so just to let you know what size we're talking about here. For our total startup, it was about $6.7 million there. Additional equipment and stuff that we bought beyond that. So our grand total is a little over $9 million to get us where we are. Okay, to get us where we are. If you look at that, about $7 million came from bond funding, state, local, and federal, right at a little over 800,000. But the donation, this is our industry partnerships that have helped us get equipment and different deals. 1.1, almost $1.2 million. I will go ahead and say us at Savannah Tech, Adrian probably agreed to this as he talked about with his presentation and my other sister colleges in the TCSG. Without the support of our industry partners and their donations that they give us, be it through equipment, supplies, aircraft, tooling, whatever, we would not be where Delta talked about the other day, the 50,000 they gave to the schools. We use that to buy new, I had hot bondage, which you use in composites that were getting old, antiquated, and failing. Each one of those machines are about $10,000 a piece. I had 6 of them I had to replace. And they were no longer supported. So that money from Delta allowed us to upgrade to the latest and greatest equipment, where if we didn't have that, I would have had to figure out where do I come up with 60,000, which I'm going to get to some operating expenses here, which we don't cover with our tuition and fees. So we rely heavily on those other dollar amounts. So this here again, I'm using Savannah Tech as an example, but this will hold true for all technical colleges in the state of Georgia that have aviation maintenance program. And it pretty much goes for all our program. Our tuition fees never ever cover the operating costs of any of our programs. So in 2019, to operate for salary, electricity for the building, and equipment and everything involved, it was $1.4 million. And tuition and fees for that year only brought in $389,000. Now, I did break it out just so you know, because I know the 147 side is on the head. If you pull out just to run the 147 operating expenses for that academic year 2019, it was $935,000. So The cost you see on the slide was to run all the aviation maintenance, all the aviation programs at Savannah Tech. I pulled out, since we really want to focus on 147, just to run the aviation maintenance stuff. Of that 1.4 million, $935,185 for the academic year 2019. So you see that's the majority of the operating costs to run aviation programs. In academic year 2020, for the aviation maintenance, just again, the 147 of that 1 million that's there, $889,756 just to run aviation maintenance that year. And in academic year 2021, that number is a little bit lower. I do want to clarify. The reason why it's a little bit lower is I had an instructor position that went vacant halfway through the year, and we did not fill for budgetary reasons. I stepped in, did some teaching, we covered and stuff just to help with budget stuff that was going on and so forth. So that's why that number is a little bit lower. So there's a salary that would normally be in there that is not in there. But out of that 881,000 for the run just aviation maintenance that year, $716,947. So again, it goes back to what we have been talking about. The aviation maintenance is a huge driver of costs. There's equipment, materials that's got to be bought, instructors, because you want to try to make sure we get them and maintain them, so our salaries and stuff and everything. So again, it's a lot higher cost. So again, you can see what it costs to run all the programs. For example, Savannah Tech has, which is a ton of them, a lot of certificates and stuff there, but the majority of all our costs is on our aviation maintenance side. So what are these programs? And everybody always talks part 147. Okay. So I figured we'll do a little review or talk a little bit about 147 so people understand, we are Aiden and Martin over at Middle Georgia. We don't make up our rules. We don't do what we want to just because as to be hard on people or we want to make the program tough and everything. We are a regulated school, just like Delta's regulated, just like Gulfstream's regulated, just like EPS is regulated when they talk about. And the FAA comes in and inspects them, if they're doing something wrong, you see it in the news. They get a fine, they get written up. They have the right to just shut them down if it's too. We as a school are certificated by the FAA. We have regulations being part 147 we have to follow. FAA comes in and inspects us. If we're not, we'll get written up. We can get fined. If it's severe enough, they can shut us down. We are at the end of that program, that 2-year. We are given, when we give that certificate to that student, we are certifying that student is knowledgeable and understands how to work on aircraft and can go take a test and then safely start doing it in industry. So again, if we cut a corner or we don't do something right and they find that out, they can start questioning every student we ever sent through that program. Just like they can question any mechanic that signs off a plane, all of a sudden finds out he wasn't doing stuff right. They can start questioning everything. We're saying, in lack of a better term, that student is airworthy to go work on aircraft and keep them safe and keep them flying. Okay, so it's a pretty high standard that we're here to, and there's a lot of responsibility of just giving it. It's not like giving a student a certificate, hey, you completed a welding or something, not knocking them or anything, that you completed our welding program. We are giving a student a certificate saying you are qualified to go sit for an FAA test and then safely start working on aircraft. Okay, 2 ways, as we talked about, person qualifies. It's either through the work experience or they go through the 147 school. And I'm going to spend some time talking about the 147 regulations that drives what we have to do. We get certificated. There's 3 areas. We can get either an airframe rating, we can get a power plant rating, or we can get what we call an airframe and power plant rating. And most schools usually get rated for all 3. Okay. That way, if an individual just wants to come in and get their general airframe, they can do that. They just want to do the power plant, we can do that. Or if they want to do everything, then we can give them the full certificate. 147.13 there. You must have facilities. Again, this is a federal regulation. You have to have facilities, equipment, materials specified by the regulations for the rating the school is seeking to offer. That means I have to have everything up, everything going all the time, as long as I'm certificated to offer that rating. So if I don't, I'm in violation of the regulations, which now I'm in violation with FAA, and that becomes a whole ball of wax. So piece of equipment breaks, we have to get that fixed. We just can't say, well, that piece of equipment is broke. We just sort of show the student how it works until we can get it fixed. If it breaks, we got it. And as aviation, our partners talked about, Aiden talked about stuff, our stuff's not cheap. Aviation stuff is very, very expensive. I always say, you want to make something expensive, learn how to either tie it to aviation or to the medical field. And it gets very expensive very quickly. You know, it goes from a $2 fork to a $3,000 fork. So again, our stuff is very expensive because we do have to have the same tooling to teach those. We just can't go buy or make something up, because we are supposed to be training people how to safely use tools that are used in industry so they can safely then start doing it in industry. Space requirements, you know, you just can't go say, hey, I just want to create any type of facility. Our facilities and some of that cost that goes into it is we have to design and make sure it meets these. I mean, the FAA in the regs tell you, you got to have heated, lighted, and ventilated facilities. Just can't go stick them, you know, out there on a tarmac or out there in the parking lot, say, put a tent up, this is going to work. They come in and they look at that. They come in the facilities and they check how many lights I have burned out. If I have too many lights out, they can determine don't have enough lighting to teach this lab, and they can shut you down. So again, it's not just the operating cost of my building, of running the program, it's the operating and keeping the building always at 100%. Or if my air conditioning is not working, I can't go in Savannah, especially go through 4 months, 5 months with no air conditioning. That's not a conducive learning environment per the FAA. Paint spraying, very small portion. Some people have a built-in paint booth. We do a portable, but again, if that breaks, that's a $10,000, $12,000 piece of equipment. If it breaks, I got to go get the money to get it fixed. You gotta have cleaning areas, supplies, areas to run engines. So again, you gotta have a tarmac or be located on an airport. You gotta have this space now to run engines. You just can't run those anywhere. We got props, we got jet blasts, we got all that stuff going on. We have to, you know, tables, test equipment. So it specifies you will have to test equipment to do all the stuff you want to do. Jacking and rigging of aircraft, you got to have space for disassembly, inspecting, assembling, troubleshooting, and timing an engine. Again, so we don't just build our facilities just because we like all this space or we want all this space and all this stuff. We are required per the regulations to have all the space and to have where we can do this. And you got to have separation, because if you go up to that second bullet there, classroom, proper separation of workspace for parts, tools, and materials. So I just can't throw everybody in one area and say, go for it. Instructional equipment requirements. We have to have airframe, structural systems, components. We got to have power plant stuff. So for example, there's hydraulic systems. We got to have hydraulic trainers or an aircraft with hydraulic systems and stuff. We got to have things to show in that last one. We got to have at least a plane that has operating flaps and retractable landing gear, or trainers that can do that. The fourth bullet there, must be enough units so that not more than 8 students will work on any at one time. That's in regulations. I can't have one piece of equipment and go put 24 students on it. So you get into a cost there where if I'm going to run classes at 24 size, when I go through certification, I have to show to the FAA, or as I'm certified, that, hey, I have at least 3 pieces of equipment if I got 24 students to be able to do this. Of course, and Aiden and Martin probably talk about this some too, is we like students to get hands-on. The way they're going to learn is hands-on. So even with one training piece of equipment, I got 8 students. It's hard to get everybody to be touching that piece of equipment at the same time. So typically it's nice to have a little bit more than that, because we want it. The more people can touch it, the better they're going to learn and the better mechanic they're going to be. Okay. And then we got to have diversified. We just can't go in and have all one type of equipment, because there ain't, as we heard the other day, there's not just one type of aircraft out there. So we got to be able to show them the different types and the different materials and different airframes and power plant structures they're going to come across. Material, special tools, shop equipment requirements. It tells us right there, you have to have adequate supply of materials, special tools, and shop equipment. So my consumables, things I use, I have that. And part of our inspection, when they come in, they will look at that. And they will say, hey, you know, you teach fluid lines and fittings. You got a class of 24. Show us that you got enough fittings and enough hose and all that stuff to do that. Consumable. Gotta be satisfactory working condition. That's back to what I was just talking about. We can't have a piece of equipment broken and just let it sit there for 3 years. They talked about hours the other day, okay? Our program is the length it is because we are required to have a certain amount of contact hours, okay? We don't make it long, just make 2 years. It doesn't take somebody 2 years anyway to get through. Most people walk in with no knowledge of anything on an aircraft to learn all the airframe system, the power plant system. It's going to take about 2 years. So I think the hours are actually pretty good. And there's some people that will probably disagree with that. But if you're properly doing it, that's about what you need. We got to have 400 hours in what we call our general requirements, 750 hours in our airframe, and 750 hours in power plant. For example, as a technical college system of Georgia, we offer 1,910 hours. We're only 10 hours above the minimum. So it's not like we're throwing a lot of extra time in there. So we're trying to make sure we utilize every hours we're required to have them, that we are using them for what they're supposed to be there. But again, you get into now a long program where you're going to take a group of students to get them through 1,900 hours of training, following semesters and breaks and stuff that happens at school, into a 2-year program. There's probably no other training even close to that and everything. You got to cover the requirements of Appendix B, C, and D. I did not put those in there. You're more than welcome to go look them up. And so, but that breaks down all the subjects we have to cover and what we have to cover. Okay. And then, of course, we got to show the practical project. So we got to show every project we're going to teach that student and how we're going to meet that back to the requirements of those appendix. And then again, we got to be able to show on our inspections or through our certification that we have everything to do whatever practical we're going to say to do that. So there's special tooling call out when you get into carburetors and stuff. So we got to make sure we got the special tooling. I know. So one set of neck tooling, I think, runs right about 3,000, 3,500. But if I can run in a class of 24, we already talked about, I got to have how many sets of it? Got to have 3. So that's just for tooling to take a carburetor apart. I'm already at $10,000 to meet the requirements of the regulation so I don't get shut down in the future. If a piece of that tooling breaks or something happens to it, I got to get it replaced. I just can't go, well, if it's broke, we just won't worry about that one. Instructor requirements. Got to have the appropriate amount of instructors holding the correct rating. And you can't have more than 1 instructor per 25 students there. Okay. And there are areas, so I talk about this at 125. So for example, we wrote our control document, and a lot of schools do, to 24. It goes back to the 8-to-1. Okay. If I go to 25 during my certification process, instead of having 3 pieces of equipment, I would have had a 4. So I was basically spending, let's say $10,000, $15,000 basically for just 1 additional student. So again, we cut our down to 24. So we fall within, again, that becomes a cost deal there and so forth. But you gotta have 1. But there's times, for example, when our students are in ground handling and servicing, we can't have all the students out there. The amount of hours we can have them in a day, 8 hours a day, no more than 6 days in a row, 40 hours in a 7-day period. Records, we got to keep all the records. We got to keep them for 2 years after the person. The FA can audit it for 2 years after they complete. So we got to have areas to put that up. Inspection, they can do inspections at any time that they want to. Okay. And advertising, you go back the other day, we cannot make any false statement, and we have to always distinguish between what's FA approved and not FA approved. So we got to be very careful on how we advertise. Level 1, 2, and 3 are the knowledge that you're told to teach at. 1 is just classroom. It's very little that we learn. Level 2, there's going to be some classroom talking and some practical application. They just learn a little bit of limited practical application. But level 3 is where most of the stuff falls at, and that is what we almost call return to airworthiness, meaning that student will perform that task perfectly when they complete that. Some challenges. That first bullet, this is why I always call the aviation mindset. You had a great quote there, Chairman, that you read beforehand. This goes back to that. In our industry, you have to be 100% focused, 100% accurate, 100% accountable, 100% of the time. most students walking into our door, and I don't care if they're 18-year-old straight out of school or somebody that is 48 years old that has never been around aviation, has never ever been held in any job that they've done to that type of standard. And that starts day one when they walk into our programs. So it's a whole mindset training that person has to learn. Strong measures for aviation careers. People talk about, I know MJA did all right during COVID. Georgia Northwestern, I think, did okay during the COVID. They satellites. We got killed. When the airlines, it was all in the news that they were shuttering planes and shutting it down. We had manufacturers in our area talking about they were having 600, 700 people getting laid off. I had never had to worry about students being in my classes being full, to within a week after that happening, to only 3 people left in classes. People walked out the door because they said, I'm not going to get a job. Why am I wasting time? We're still trying to recover from that. I'm working very good with our industry partner, Gulfstream being one of them, to help us overcome that. Okay. The problem is, what happens is when things starts taking off, it doesn't make the news as well, and so forth. Face-to-face recruiting, we were huge for us and all the schools getting out face-to-face with high schools being shut down and stuff. We lost that. And so I have a dual enrollment program I run up at Effingham. For 2 years now, I haven't been able to run it just because we have not been able to get our recruitment and stuff going on. So we're missing those high school students and stuff. We normally would start getting interested, just because with everything going on, we have not been able to get into it. No false on, it's just the environment. And so that's been killing us. It was touched on by Aiden a little bit, our faculty and retention, our retention and recruitment of them. We compete with the industry. So typically when we get, or I get a TCSG, and it's probably the same thing with Warren, a lot of times we get people, it's people near the end of their careers. They did their time in the industry, made their money, good to go. Yeah, I've always wanted to teach, give back a little bit and stuff. So they come in, but how long are they going to be with you? They only probably got a 5-year plan anyway, and then they want to be fully retired. So by the time you get them broken in as an instructor, they're walking out the door. And then the cost of operations. Partnerships. One of the big thing is the visits. Our industry partners come and visit. As you saw, there's a wide variety the other day. By the students having such a wide variety, by those partnerships and those people coming in and talking and letting them know what they can do when that student graduates, it lets them narrow down where do they want to go to work. The support, again, the support from industry financial wise, as you can see from operating costs. If it wasn't for that, none of us would be close to where we should be right now. And of course, there's co-op and internships that have been done, which work out very good because it allows the student to go to school a little bit and allows them to go work in industry. So it starts tying back what they're learning. So again, thank you. I had a long thing, but I appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Talon. I appreciate both presentations, because I think we're from a perspective of not only the committee, but I hope in general, our higher education institutions, both from USG and technical college, the more and more we understand these aviation, we understand that especially these programs are very much, they're out of our control. You either do it FAA way or you don't do it. And there is that, as you said, from a perspective of there is no mistakes. This isn't, this is a higher level. It's not only a higher level, but it's what they have to focus on to turn out, that student that one doesn't make mistakes. And so I appreciate that. I want now to just have some honest conversations. I want to try to outline this because I know we can with questions and just, as we talk, we've got limited time. And I want to try to focus on a couple of things. One, we heard from industry yesterday about need, but we're also hearing about partnerships yesterday. And now we're also hearing about partnerships with our higher institutions, and also how that is coming out with also from a perspective of K through 12. And those programs where industry or our higher institutions go in and actually try to partner with, our high schools or our college and career academies, which I guess are through the same. All right. and how we get that pipeline. So we're hearing all of this, and I want us to make sure that we are understanding, those partnerships, because some may say we're partnering, and is it enough? Are we doing the right thing? So I think that's a general conversation I want to make sure that we go through. That's one. Second thing is yesterday we heard, and I think it was eloquently put by, was it Jeff? No, from Delta, Patrick. And I thought this was a bigger industry. Patrick did it was very eloquent with that, as far as, this awesome industry that is quite frankly, I think everybody's realizing it now, it's bigger in Georgia than we thought. But there are great high paying jobs across the field in aviation, but especially within what we're focusing on, FAA pilots, and that's where a great need is. But he did a great job by saying, a lot of times that student doesn't know how to get to that end point. We made a great comment about Jody and Representative Dukes, Winford, y'all made great comments about, the marketing part of this. And I think he made a great statement of, a lot of times these students have no idea what's out there, the great job. The parents don't understand. They want a great opportunity for their kids to go into and have a great career. Okay. But the dots aren't being connected. And I also think from a perspective of, I don't think one of those dots is we're telling our story from a higher education perspective of the quality of these programs that we've just heard our higher institutions talk about, to let people know that they're there. And I think that's two things. People need to know this is one of the dots. This is where you can go to jumpstart and get into, or get that education to go on and have a great career. And that's part of us, but it's also, I'm going to put the honors back on industry. Their need is there, and we need them to step up in partnership. And we talked about how do we do that. So that's one other thing. But the second thing is money and resources. And I appreciate what has been presented here, because I think the more and more we understand this outside of the people who are actually doing this, how complicated, how technical this is. All right. How much regulation is there by FAA, that these programs are, this isn't teaching. And again, this is nothing against any of the other fields and disciplines that we have within higher education, but this isn't teaching, a curriculum where, the just the faculty and the books are the highest cost of that program. These programs are dictated again by the FAA and all of these requirements. And so I think hopefully out of this, we will begin to realize, okay, that we've got to focus on this, and we were going to look at funding, or at least options of where our resources are currently allocated, where we are from a benchmark of what we're producing. And then how do we, I think in the short term, for lack of a better word, pick the low hanging fruit of how we can immediately start to produce more and more of these students, which we heard from industry that they wanted them yesterday. They don't want them tomorrow, next week, or next year. They needed them yesterday. Okay. And then also from there, where are we going? I want to ask these institutions, what is your 2-year, what is your 5-year, and what is your 10-year plan? And with what you have, and also if we start to look at this, what are the obstacles? What are the resources that we need to put into this, or things that we can do like marketing and all? Where do we need to focus to make sure that we're meeting a short-term goal as soon as we possibly can, and then where are we out, 5-10 years from now? So those are the sort of discussions that I want us to have. I don't want to get in and mix a lot of things. I want us to be very focused on that. So with that, we'll start with anyone. Let's start with real quick. Let's do a marketing, and I think that was something we talked about last year in the partnership. So where are we with the industry? and briefly, I'd like to hear from both Technical College and USG, those partnerships. Let's talk about where those partnerships are with not only those institutions, what are they doing to help financially, or the programs, but where are we in conjunction with that dual enrollment college career academy getting the pipeline? So that, I don't care. No.
Well, I'll touch base on the dual enrollment in college and career academy.
Hey, Aiden, if you'll move that mic towards you so that everyone can hear.
I'll touch briefly on the dual enrollment in college and career academy and a little bit on the marketing. The FAA stringent requirements make dual enrollment very difficult. Now, TAU's in a location where I think you have some high school students come on.
Not with my aviation maintenance. We're doing it.
So the aviation maintenance program, the contact hours are so long, it's difficult to do it in a dual enrollment fashion as the current regulations sit. Now, the FAA has a Part 147 rewrite that we expected a couple of years ago. It's been put on hold once before, and now it's all regulatory changes. It's my understanding have been put on hold. So we're still waiting on that FAA rewrite. We are poised once that FAA rewrite, if it is approved, it will allow for what the FAA considers satellite locations. And at that point in time, then we can go into the local high schools, we can hire faculty there, provide equipment there, and then we can offer some limited training there so they don't have to come to us or they don't have to go to TAU. They can do it on site if they have, the requisite facility. We've been working with Griffin College and Career Academy for a couple of years, and they've got a phenomenal facility that they just started. There's several other college and career academies that have programs as well with the Georgia Aviation curriculum, but that Georgia Aviation curriculum doesn't meet the 147 requirement. So our hands are kind of tied on the 147 side of the house. When I say 147, the A&P program, as far as what we can and can't do. Now, we do have some students that have come to us dual enrollment that have come on campus and done those in the past. But like I said, those course contact hours are so long, they have to be able to allot at least a half a day with us to be able to do that. Our aircraft structural technology program is designed. We have dual enrollment students in that, and that's designed. They can start and finish by the time they graduate. But on the A&P side of the house, it's a little difficult. Marketing, we've done a good job at marketing at Middle Georgia. We've got a great team there, and that's evident by our waiting list to get in. But it's still tough. We actually have an episode on Disney Plus that's going to be aired pretty soon here, nationally, internationally, that was filmed on our campus, which it was mainly about a specific program, but it will highlight all the programs there that will help. And it will help Georgia wide, not just Middle Georgia State University. Marketing is expensive. I won't get into, some of the conversations yesterday about how some programs market and some don't. But it's difficult to hit that, to determine where marketing dollars will work. And my bosses are all sitting behind me, so I'm not going to overstep my bounds here and I'm not a marketing person, but they put a lot of effort into it. But it's right. It's not just a Middle Georgia State need.
It's a state need.
It's a state need.
And hold on, and we will get to questions, but the thing that was brought up yesterday, and I thought this was very, as we went in and talked about, we have these private institutions that seem to be busting at the door, but when we have accumulated the data as far as the cost of these private schools, we're sitting here. I'm quite frankly, puzzled that, when TCSG and USG have such a 2-year level, which is where these A&P programs are, such a low cost, as far as the student, then on top of, with perhaps the Hope Grant and Hope Scholarship, the ease is there, but yet we're seeing in the A&P part and in flight training, I have data for Emory-Riddle, and again, a private institution, $208,000 per flight. but yet at USG, it's 78,000. Okay. But they can't get enough. I mean, they don't have enough room. So why are they doing this better than us? And I would also say, and I don't have the data for the 2-year program of A&P at Emory-Riddle, but I understand, I think it's in the $40,000 or $50,000 range. So could y'all speak to that? And you know, within the industry, why are we got students that are going there versus at what I would argue, I want to say quality programs within USG and TSG that quite frankly are less expensive and offer or you know, have a less cost barrier to getting into those programs.
I'm good. Checklist done. All right. So I speak a little bit on that and piggyback off of what Aiden said. I think a lot of with our costs or put the costs up there. So to operate our program, you see what it is and what we're bringing in tuition. So then we're down to, we got to make up that difference just to be able to run the program and stuff. And so don't end up with a lot of stuff in my budget left over for marketing. Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to keep a program afloat and make sure I meet the regulations and stuff. And then we're also at schools where we offer other programs outside aviation. So again, back to, as Aiden alluded to before, when we go to ask for capital or anything like that, we're competing against then all these other programs and so forth. So I think it comes at it where you got a private school here in the state of Georgia that is nothing but aviation maintenance. And when they bring in $60,000 per student and they only have to focus on aviation maintenance, I think that makes some of the difference there and so forth.
I mean, from your perspective also.
I would like, if I may piggyback off this a little bit. What I see is that industry endorsement is one of the biggest things, if we're talking about low-hanging fruit, that can be done that drives students to our doors to get educated. It adds a level of validity just to give you an example with our aircraft structural technology department. Currently, that program, our A&P program is doing wonderfully. It's busting at the seams. Our aircraft maintenance technology, which has typically been middle Georgia kids that want to go to work at Robins Air Force Base and be structural mechanics. That program for the last year or two has really struggled. And I'm talking about numbers around 10 students in a cohort starting in the fall. That would be, and I can remember times where we had 90 students in that program. And that was driven by Robins making it clear that they had a defined co-op program in place so the students could do work study, and making it known that that was a preferred pathway if you wanted to work for Robins. So just making that known, it just travels like wildfire through our community. So that's definitely a way, because, you know, and I don't want to speak to marketing either, you know, that's well, not my.
That was one of the things we talked about yesterday. And I think with Amy Hudnall from Georgia Department of Economic Development, I think we've got to get that partnership back with the industry. I think you're making a great point from a point of view of industry endorsing our higher education institutions and the work product, the workforce that they're turning out. Now, there is a differential, and that's cost. I mean, and I think that's a segue that I want to get into right now, which is, you know, where are we at right now? What are we currently producing from our institutions? And so let's talk about that. And we've got some budget numbers, and this is probably the tough conversation, but, you know, as we went and went around, we've sort of got from a point of view of the FAA A&P programs, whether that's at the associate or the certificate level. Okay. And again, our numbers are approximate. And I want to state this right across the board right now. They're very much in line with each other. There are differences because of what USG and how they work and how technical college system works. So this is not to sit here and parse hairs over whatever the difference is. I want to be very clear with that. But TSG on average at the associate level degree is about $18,000 for this program. USG for the associate level degree is about 13 and a half. Okay. So that's at the FAA. Now, obviously TSG does not have the flight training, but on the flight training, it's about $78,000. Okay. And the only thing we have to compare there is private industry. Again, Emory-Riddle, it's about $208,000. So one, I think you guys have got a bargain, and then you consider in the Hope Scholarship and grants. I mean, these students, the barriers there, but again, what is our barrier from increasing our numbers? And I think that gets back to cost. All right. So we look at waiting list, or we look at where there's capacity. What are the barriers there? Would y'all speak to that? Where are we, we're looking at, the cost of faculty, cost of capital, the cost of, operations. Where are we with that in comparison with what we're getting within, the tuition or within the funding respectively from USG or the technical college system? Don't get in trouble with your bosses back there, but I'm gonna tap them down. I think this is an honest conversation, and I want to have it.
Well, kind of goes back to one of the slides that I talked about. One of the barriers for us in being able to expand enrollment is hiring qualified faculty. That's probably that and equipment are our two biggest barriers. Facilities, I mean, obviously, as we grow and expand, we need more facilities. That was part of the growth and expansion that I submitted. But you can have all the facility that you want. If you don't have faculty in the facility to teach, you're not going anywhere. It's like when you talk about the airplane, and Tal talked about the airplane. If it's not built right, it's not going anywhere. If you don't have anybody to fly it, it's not going anywhere. So that's a challenge that goes back to the slide that I talked about, the cost differential between private sector and public sector educators. Barriers, just to kind of piggyback, private institutions have different admission standards. And I'm not going to get into whether we're better or worse than them. What I'll just say is that we have a certain academic criteria that people have to meet to get into our institution. And that academic criteria is there to make sure that they're going to be able to meet the academic rigor. I could open the floodgates and take anybody in that can fog a mirror. But at the end of the day, is that serving that person well? Because they'll come to us, they'll accrue a little bit of debt with us, and they may fail out. Now, if they go to a private institution, they may incur a lot of debt and fail out. So, that's, I think it's important that we, and TCSG has to say they have enrollment admissions requirements as well. And that's to ensure. So that is a little bit of a barrier there as well, because if a student knows if they're going to come to us, they're going to have to take, the Compass or the SAT, ACT, or whatever it is they have to take. And they're going to be judged on their high school curriculum. Whereas if they can show up at the doorsteps here, they're going to walk them in. They're going to help them sign the dotted line to get their private loans, and then they're done. Our processes are there to ensure success. If we didn't have those processes up there, the graduations that I showed you earlier would be much, much worse. Those are some of the barriers from getting the students in the door, and also being able to get them out of the door and be able to service their needs while they're there as far as the faculty is concerned. I mean, obviously, when you talk about flight training, you've got to have airplanes to do flight training.
And instructors.
I mean, I won't belabor that point. I think everybody knows that. And that's why we're constantly coming back asking for small caps to be able to grow that fleet to be able to meet our needs.
So let's get back to faculty for a second. I know we've got a demand within industry, retiring, demographic, people aging out from a retirement perspective, and trying to recruit these new people to come in and take advantage of this. So industry is there. So, when it does come to, and I know there are some retired people that go and serve for 5 years. I get that, but you two guys aren't that old. Okay. And I can tell you safely, looking at we've got our head of our institutions in here in this room right now. These programs are built based on the people who built them. It's not, and again, I'm not taking away from the presidents of the colleges. They're here. I'm not taking away from, all the faculty administration between what I would call the deans or the heads of these departments. But these programs are built by these folks, and they come out of industry and they've got a passion for it. So I'm seeing and hearing anecdotally that it's hard to get that passionate person to come here for the amount of money that we've got out there for a faculty. It's just too much. And I think you alluded to it. We're never going to get up to industry standards, but where are we going to get to from a point of view of making sure that we're competitive and that person wants to come to a technical college or the USG system and participate with this? So I think that's one barrier. Is that a correct statement?
Yes. Can I add a little bit to that?
Mhm.
So along with the faculty too, it's not just, it's trying to find the right person to be a faculty too. You just can't take anybody with 30 years or 20 years or 15 years of being an A&P and stick. They might be a fantastic mechanic, but to have that person that has that right personality, that right gel with the students, and to be able to take somebody that has no knowledge of something and to be correctly to bring them along to where it needs to be, as well as follow the rigors of our program, that becomes a big barrier. You have people that will interview for a job and they're interested in it, or you will bring them in as an adjunct to let them try, but their personality is just not an instructor. You can't stick them in a classroom. They are great. I could put them on a flight line all day maintaining aircraft, and they are perfect for that. And it would be phenomenal. But you're now in also a teaching environment where you're taking students that we have to teach that 100% rigor to, that have never had that before. And how do you deal with that? So to find that personality, I think, becomes one of the biggest challenges that I see, not just the cost of it and so forth. And again, what I typically find, I just had to hire 2 instructors starting for this fall. They're both retired. They're both military retired people, so they're still a little bit younger, and they're at the point too, hey, I want to, give back. And they did have the right personality because of their training in the military. They did some instructor, and they were used to taking soldiers that had no experience and teaching them a skill set and stuff. But again, I find that to be a tough deal. So it's not just, I think, the cost, what we're paying is the right fit personality, because again, you got a lot of good maintenance people out there, but they are not people I could put in the classroom to teach maintenance, if that makes sense.
There's a special skill set to be not only knowledgeable on a subject matter, but then an additional skill set to teach and to do that. Hey,
when a private institution which solely teaches, say, airframe and power plant, they spend marketing dollars on one program. We as an institution and TCSG, the various technical colleges, they have to recruit for all programs. So marketing dollars can't be just focused on aviation. And listen, Middle Georgia State University has supported aviation since we consolidated and became a university. I've gotten more support than I have the entire previous time I was there. But it's like I talked about in our small cap projects, there's other needs. Nursing needs marketing. That's a high needs area right now. IT, health sciences, education. We have to recruit and market for all the programs. So that's a point of interest.
well, with that being said, let's look at, and I think this is, and again, we're probably committee going to ask for additional data and this will pose some questions, but let's look at what we're producing. We know that the need is beyond anything, as y'all two have said. I mean, we can't even begin to meet the need, not only globally, but nationally, but also from a state that's concentrating on this. So let's talk about this. Out of these what we're graduating, and what we're doing. How do we increase this? And as we started to look for the numbers, you know, Middle Georgia, you know, roughly from a point of view of whether it's a certificate or the degree program, and this is a 2-year total. I think I'm correct in looking at this, is 81. Okay. Is that, I think that's where the data is that 80? All right. My math may be different. So, you know, and then you look at capacity. And again, these are cohorts. So I know, you know, enrollment's different. You got different graduation times, but we've got that many graduates that are basically coming out over a 2-year period. Now, when we get to the technical colleges, obviously different campuses, different demands and all. So we're looking at some of these programs, and y'all did it over a 3-year versus a 2-year. But you know, you're Augusta, roughly 24, 33 graduates over unduplicated, trying to put the A&P together. And again, I know there's other things, but about 33 over a 3-year period. So Central Georgia, obviously with the base and the Brigadier General, I think that was roughly 57, 47, 30, 77. So, I mean, you know, you had 57, 30, and 47 over a 3-year period. That was Central Georgia. Georgia Northwestern, unduplicated 12, 23, and 31 over a 3-year respective period. Savannah, 33, 63, and 42. I think that was sort of the unduplicated. And again, guys, I don't want to parse numbers. We're trying to just get to a broad perspective here. South Georgia, 25, 24, and 34. Does that sound about right? Unduplicated. So we also start to look at capacity. Are we at capacity? And if we're not at capacity, or if we have a waiting list, it's sort of the same problem as I'm seeing, and I want y'all to speak to this. So when we look at, again, Middle Georgia, your enrollment's up, your capacity is at 150, you've got a wait list of 46. So what do we need to do to pick the low-hanging fruit? Same thing with technical college system. What are we doing? Why is our capacity not either being up, or we have a waiting list depending on the college? Okay. What do we need to do? And I think what we saw in our tours is that we've got to have some more resources, faculty, the tools, the plane, you know, the all of that. And I want y'all to speak to that. How do we get the lowest hanging fruit? And I think that's the question I want to ask y'all to go back, not only to answer back to the General Assembly in this committee, but I think it's something that we need to talk about at the bigger system level of where are our resources, and how do we broach this subject with either more resources, tweaking our resources that we currently have, or adding to them. Yeah. All right.
What I'll say, just to give you some perspective on Middle Georgia with our AMT program, in 2019, before 2019, we were taking one cohort a semester, a cohort being approximately 25 students. And that's what Tal was talking about, the instructor-student ratio. So in fall of 2019, we realized we had enough additional students to justify starting a second cohort in the fall. So we made the decision to do that. We did it largely without adding any faculty. We just kind of ran lean with faculty teaching overload. You know, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a one-time thing. You know, are we seeing a trend here? It happened again the next fall of 2020, and then again in 2021. Now we've added a faculty member along the way, but so in those 2 years, we've gone from 4 cohorts in the system at any given time to 6. So we had about 80 students at any given time, and now we're closer to 135 or 140. You know, the ideal being, you know, we have 150, and that's how many we're able to, you know, graduate out 75 a year. So I think at this point, MGA would be looking at, we really need to add more faculty and additional equipment to spread the students out. So that's kind of where we are right now. So.
Tal?
Thank you, Chairman. So I want to talk, because each of the schools are a little bit different and stuff from I understand. So it's all, like Georgia Northwest Technical College, you saw, you know, their numbers sort of started going up there, I think, over the years that you had, if I remember correctly, over the 3 years. Central Georgia Tech's numbers are up and so forth. So they talked about it, you know, the base work with Central Georgia Tech, and they got to move in, you know, they moved to a new facility, allowed them to run some more co-ops and give them more spaces for their program and stuff. Georgia Northwestern, I know, added a third instructor on, so they added a third a cohort in there to get that going and so forth and everything. So I want to speak on the Savannah Technical College side, and Augusta Tech is the same way we are. We're limited. Augusta Tech's facility is right at 15,000 square feet. They couldn't add another cohort. I mean, they run 2 cohorts. Their facility's full. So an FA or nobody's ever going to, you know, until they get more. We have, 30,000 square foot facility, but I lose half that facility because I have a manufacturer I have to support with other programs. So also my FA programs only have 15,000 square feet to work out of as well. So I'm at the same deal where I can't add another cohort to start, like they talked about in Eastman there, where I can bring 2 cohorts, because I don't have a classroom, I don't have a lab or any of that to put in, that the FA is not going to certify me to go above 48 students. They already told me that. I'm not going above that.
So what I'm hearing, and we're going to get to some questions, the members have been very patient, but I'm hearing on 2 things. I mean, we're hearing faculty, because you've got, again, the limitations based on FAA, you know, regulations. And we're also seeing from a point of view, even if you've got faculty, if there may be capacity issues as far as the physical structure or some of the items that you were talking about, the tools or the equipment, the planes, landing gears, engines, those things that are needed in order to have the students work on those. So we've got 2 areas there.
I would agree.
Jody, you've been, and I know Representative Dukes had one earlier. Jody, we're going to let ladies go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just needed a point of clarification, and mainly for you with the TCSG system, because you're so spread out across the state. Is it your understanding at this point that the staff that we do have is being utilized to its capacity, the staff's capacity? Meaning, and the reason for my question was, you doing the equipment necessary per 8 students, the staff having, you know, 1 staff per 25 students. Is our equipment at this point keeping up with what you have for staff functioning? So across the state, if you have this answer, are each of those qualified personnel, teachers, so difficult to find, but are they being used at their greatest ability?
For Savannah Tech, I can say yes. So I have, because I run 2 cohorts at a time. I have 2 full-time faculty where that's covered. I serve as the 3rd overflow when it gets to a situation where somebody has to go out and do engine runs while another group of students, we can't leave students unsupervised. So I will split out with that group and stuff. So yes, we are fully utilizing our faculty and staff and to service the amount of 2 cohorts that we're certified to do right now.
I wanted to make sure too that the state, well, when we're talking about funding, of course, and that's a big deal, but that we are kept up with the equipment that is necessary to manage what level these instructors can handle.
Correct. So that goes back to, I think, the 8-to-1 you're sort of talking about.
Yes.
And yes, ma'am. Again, industry the donations that we saw for us especially, and I think for the other schools, and that has been huge. So I go back to my composite equipment that went down on me. If it wouldn't had been for that $50,000 from Delta, I wouldn't have been able to do that. If it hadn't been for donations from Gulfstream, I wouldn't have been able to get the updated avionics, the 3 toolboxes I need to serve 24 students to be able to properly teach the wiring program that we want to put into our aviation maintenance deal. So again, industry partners have been huge on that, where we have relied on that. And of course, there's some Perkins dollars, that's federal dollars, that we rely on that as well, and as to help out.
Thank you.
Answer that question too, as far as faculty or yes, the max. Quick speak, because I know John's not here, but you know, I know in that particular case, when we were up at Northwestern, you know, they were sort of getting at their max, and you've got to have this overflow, and you're starting to get into the directors of the program, actually, like you. And I think I'll let Aiden speak to this, but the actual directors are actually not only directing and overseeing the program, but they're also now also filling in as instructors. I'll let Middle Georgia speak to that one in your case.
Yeah, thank you. So we're Martin alluded to this earlier, how he was able to increase in his program, and the same on the flight side of the house. All of our faculty are teaching overloads. I'm teaching a heavy overload. The associate dean teaches a heavy overload. Martin is teaching a very heavy overload. Now, I say that just to preface this, that our president, Dr. Blake, has implemented a staffing plan in order to get our staffing up to where it needs, which includes a salary study that's coming to be able to look at our current salary, see where we can adjust, and fit that within the MGA budget. So we've got a plan in place to increase that. It's, you know, we'll still run into that barrier of competing with industry, but, you know, we're working to get it closer. That will help that. You know, when you talk about maximizing resources and those, you know, I think, Tal, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, most of the schools around the state have some capacity. To me, and even where those programs are maxed out with capacity, it's still cheaper to expand within an existing program than it is to start up a brand new program. First of all, you've got to hire a new director to run that program. You've got all the construction costs from the ground up. Whereas if Tao needed to increase his facility size, I need to increase my facility size. You're talking about smaller construction projects to get you more lab space, more hangar space, more classroom space, as opposed to bringing someone that has no experience in aviation from the ground up to try to build a program from the ground up, and to go back and establish all those industry relationships that we have already established with Delta, with Gulfstream, with Epps Aviation, with all of our industry partners. So to me, from a physical standpoint, it makes more sense to grow and expand existing programs than it does to start up new programs throughout the state. Just my 2 cents as a taxpayer.
Zoom Dukes, you're next. Is that because also of some of the FAA requirements that exist now, regardless of whatever the future rules may be? FAA makes you go ahead and put the structure on the ground, instructor
Absolutely.
in place, program completely in place, inspected
That-
before you open the door and accept the first student.
100% correct. So if Tal or myself wanted to expand, we can expand immediately. And we can go ahead and, you know, as long as we have the facilities in place, we can go ahead and start rolling those students. It takes 2 to 3 years to get a program up. Best case scenario, 2 to 3 years.
And then 2 years for the first cohort to
Right.
graduate.
Right.
So again, this goes back into that 2, 5, 6, 10-year part.
Right.
Representative Dukes, you've been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of my concerns have been addressed, but I guess my basic one centered around, are you all at capacity currently with what you can take as far as students are there? That's the first thing. And if that, next question is, how much over capacity are you? I saw one place here where that you got a waiting list.
Well, I'll go
Wanna go
first.
first?
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
All right.
So I would say that currently with the faculty that we have, because this semester I have faculty that are teaching overload, I would not take another cohort right now without adding to that. So I would need to do that. And then given the facilities we have, we would have to be very careful about how we manage the flow of students through those facilities. We are authorized to go up to 200 without asking for an increase from the FAA for our certificate. That many in the program taking maintenance classes right now would be very tight.
What would you need in order to, how many do you have right now? What would you need in order to get to 200?
I have 8 right now, so to add 2 additional cohorts, I would say 3 to 4 instructors there to cover that. And, I'd want to sit down with a little more pen and paper before
Absolutely.
making that call. But because the thing about, our program, when we take in a cohort, we're making essentially a 2-year promise to that family and those students that if they are successful every semester, we've got classes lined up for them all along the way, right to graduation. So there's no guesswork in it. So from day one, we're essentially making that commitment to them. Once they get accepted into the program, that we will go with them through that program to graduation if they stay with us.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, as I mentioned earlier, we have a waiting list to get in both the flight program and the maintenance program. Just to alleviate overloads of current faculty, that's easily 4 faculty lines, full-time faculty lines, just to alleviate current overloads. That doesn't include growing and expanding. That's just to maintain status quo without overburdening the current faculty and staff.
So clarification back to Winford's comment is that, and I think this is where it's going, we're hearing both on the technical college side and the USG side is that we've got faculty overload. In other words, we have people taking up additional classes, in other words, sort of going to the max, especially with faculty and the administration part, then also diving down and taking a bigger teaching load. Is that a safe comment? So that's where you're saying the 4 to get back to where we're not necessarily overloading. And then above that, to start to really expand these cohorts, that's additional faculty. Is that, Tal, I know you wanted to, and I know you can't comment for all of the colleges. I don't.
And
Yeah.
we're pretty much all in the
Yeah.
same boat. Just a little nuances difference between us, but overall. So the big deal, what you asked about capacity. So, we're certified up to 48 because I only can have 2 cohorts. I typically will never be at 48. And the reason why is if I bring in a cohort of 24, I'm going to start 24, but the rigor of the program, we always lose. So I think sometimes that, well, you got room for 48 people. Why don't you have 48? Well, Martin and them talk about, we'll take in that cohort to start them, but not all 24 or 25 are going to make it through. You're going to start losing something. Yeah, I might be certificated with 48, but I only have 30 people currently in the program because of the rigor of the program over a 2-year time frame. Life happens, to people and so forth. So again, we might not be completely out of capacity, so we look at maybe want to do an alternative program, an evening program stuff. I'm still into the same situation where I had to have a full-time faculty to do that. Went to a deal when it becomes a safety issue. I back to ground ops or something. I had to have a lab assistant or somebody to come in and assist at that point in time. Also, too, I had to have equipment because if I got a night class doing engine overhaul and my day rotation falls in at the same time to do engine overhaul, I gotta have enough for each one, and now I'm into a space requirement and all this stuff. And then,
But Tal, let me
Okay.
stop here because there are nuances between USG and technical
Mhm.
college, and I don't want to go into those right now. Okay. Missions and things like that. So let's,
Yeah.
that, I don't think for the bigger picture, I want to dive into that. Obviously, this is a very rigorous program. We've heard that. It must be a rigorous program. It's FAA. So you are going to have cohorts that, start with a max and then get down. So again, whether it's the technical colleges, as we've heard, that are really, it's access, is a mission of access. But you guys are doing a good job of trying to set expectations up front
Yes,
so
sir.
that you don't have somebody waste time or waste the college resources. Again,
Or
sort of
see-
same thing on the Middle Georgia. You do have maybe some access, standards in there, but you're also doing a good job of trying to set expectations. I don't want to go there. I want to know, with the demand that we heard from industry yesterday, okay, how do we maximize what we have
Okay.
and we grow what we have to meet these demands that quite frankly are, we should have started 10 years ago. I mean,
Correct.
yeah.
I would agree with you.
So
I-
that's my question.
One just quick thing that we've done to try to help out with the, the attrition rate when the students get in is we free up either another instructor or a lab tech. We've had a lot of success with having a lab tech that has an A&P that can go into the shop setting with the students. So our freshman cohorts, we've been starting with 30. And usually, I don't know if you found this, Tal, but by the end of that first semester, that's where your washout's going to be typically, or the largest bit of it. So going into second semester, we're closer to that number that the FAA allows and are able to hopefully graduate more A&Ps at the end and get, I guess, just a better return on investment of our instructors for that amount of time. So, and that has worked well. Sometimes you're trying to read the tea leaves, and we certainly don't go into it intentionally thinking we want 20% to wash out so that we're down
But
to that number.
historical,
Yes, sir.
historical numbers and
Yes, sir.
data says that this is what it is. And again, I don't want to belabor this. We understand what's inherent within the program. I need to know what we do. And maybe some of this is that you work on these cohorts to keep some of these folks there. You may need additional instructors. I know we heard at Northwestern, there's a lot of time that is spent with some of these folks to help them sort of get over that initial hurdle and to keep them in that cohort, because they end up being great graduates from the program after, if they get through it. So there may be a little bit of some help in some cases. And that's, again, added faculty. That's the passion from which the faculty, teach from. So that's one thing. And again, I want to keep this at a higher level. So let's don't get too detailed right here. But I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing faculty, I'm hearing facility cost, and I'm hearing tools, operation type cost are sort of the three barriers. And I think Tal, you did a good job of going into the Part 147, tying this back to, here are the requirements and limitations per the FAA. Okay. So we do have some limitations there. Winfrey, you got one more, or all right.
I'm sorry. You said currently you are understaffed by at least 4 or 5 faculty members.
Yes.
Was that not true? So I guess how do you plan what's the plan for, I'm in the construction industry. We do a construction academy in Albany. We have the same problems. You got people who are great craftsmen, but they don't want to go and touch a computer and do all of and I can imagine you all probably have the same thing when it comes to aviation. Great mechanics, but you try to get them into a classroom and do lesson plans, it's a whole different situation. So how do you plan to, or
So
how
that,
can we help you? That's what the chairman wants to know, I know.
well, I mean, the way we're helping ourselves is, we've been working with the president. He demanded a process in order to alleviate this need. He understands that the stress that we're under faculty wise and administration wise in the School of Aviation. So, you know, a lot of times we have a tendency to just, I'm a military guy and we use the term suck it up and press on my pride, you know, so we have a tendency to do that, but it's not a viable long-term project. And that's why Dr. Blake and Provost Jinks is set down, and we've outlined a process to evaluate faculty needs, to evaluate the salary, to get those in there. You know, our problems are twofold. It's equipment. Obviously, the equipment is needed and the faculty are needed. We've gotten good support from the legislation to increase our equipment needs on the flight side of the house. We have not gotten any new aviation maintenance equipment other than the stuff that we've gotten through foundation donations and small items that we've purchased. I suspect that TAL has a lot of old equipment there. I think TAL's program has some of the old holdover equipment from Clayton State, I believe. I actually oversaw the transfer of that equipment down there from Clayton State. So there's a constant equipment need that we need to upgrade, because if you're teaching aviation maintenance technology, you need to be teaching on as new equipment as you can, the latest and greatest. I mean, obviously we're not going to have a 777 or a brand new 737 or anything out there, but having newer aircraft to train on. And then back to the faculty side. So as we've increased our fleet size and our student enrollment size, our staff and operating budget has not been increased greatly. It has been increased, but not to the same ratio that we've increased our fleet size to on the flight side of the house. And then as we've created these double cohorts, we have added new positions, and we just requested, we're going through our current budget process for this next fiscal year. And that's what we're working on. I mean, our institution is very committed to creating that, but it comes back to salaries for us on the faculty side of the house. I mean, that's.
And I would just add that, you know, when it comes to equipment needs, I think the partnerships that we have with like Gulfstream and Delta are showing great promise. I think that is going to be an area where we're all really going to benefit, because, you know, if they have second and third generation equipment that they don't need, that's new to us a lot of times in the technical schools. So
Okay.
That's very helpful.
All right. Guys, real quick, and there's several things I want to go through. Tal, I know you want to respond, keep it brief, and then I want to talk a little bit about the flight stuff. So Tal, go ahead.
So on the need to expand capacity, I know for Augusta Tech, Savannah Tech, we need facility, equipment, and faculty. We will not go any without all three of those. Georgia Northwestern, Central Georgia Tech, and the presidents, I know they will need equipment and faculty for sure, maybe a little bit of facility. And South Georgia Tech, I know we need equipment and faculty and maybe a little bit of facility. But us, Augusta Tech and Savannah Tech, we're going nowhere bigger until we have more facility space.
Things, and again, I want to look at this in buckets, and TSG does not have the flight side of it. And I know the previous, comment was you've gotten some help from the General Assembly from a perspective of aircraft. But I noticed that the flight, your capacity right now is 245, your enrollment's 686, and you got a wait list of 441. So again, we heard from industry yesterday of the compression that's happening in the sense of, everybody's fighting for airline pilots, all the way from commercial to general aviation. It was amazing when we went to Savannah, and, the Gulfstream partnership with Savannah, but also in there, we learned that there's one of the biggest pilot training facilities there for just Gulfstream. Guys, it's huge. I mean, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars of a facility that has come just to Georgia, just to help get pilots who are ready for a corporate airline or corporate plane, such as a Gulfstream, to then get a higher rating or to get acclimated to the specific rating of a Gulfstream, whatever that plane is. So we're talking about pilots, and we heard yesterday the Propel program, which I thought gave some insight. You grow pilots, and I'm gonna let Aiden correct me if I'm not wrong, make sure I'm not wrong, but you just don't graduate a pilot from a school and they automatically go sit in a Airbus 350 or a Gulfstream or a 747. It is a progress of experience in hours, and it's sort of that ecosystem where you start at the bottom and you work your way up to the bigger and more complicated aircraft. And so with that, and again, I know we're running out of time, and I appreciate the patience, but we've got the waiting list. So I want to talk specifically some of the barriers that maybe there are. How do we clear out this waiting list? And quite frankly, I wish we had more time, but I look at what we've got. I look at some of the universities around the United States that have programs. I'm hearing that our program at Middle Georgia is being compared to what I think it's North Dakota is probably like the national standard. I mean, it's like the one, but the one we have here at Middle Georgia, people are going, wow, we didn't know this. And how do we on the flight training side of this, how do we clear out the waiting list and start producing the pilots that we need?
Well, Mr. Chairman, money. I mean, I know that's a flippant answer, but equipment, facilities, and faculty. I mean, that's what it comes down to. The numbers, the faculty numbers that I was talking about earlier, that's just to handle what's currently there, not an expansion. We could hire 10 or 11 new faculty next week to grow and expand that program. So when we talk about University of North Dakota, the reason I use that as a benchmark is because it's a state funded university. It's a phenomenal school, great facilities, got about 2,000, 2,100 students there. We're a little over halfway there. And I think, and the state of Georgia believes that it's worth the investment, to grow and expand here. I was at University of North Dakota a couple of years ago and ran into a couple of students from Georgia that had no idea about Middle Georgia State University. So it's a budget issue. For the pipeline, you're right. I mean, the good thing about Delta Propel is Propel requires them to stay and complete a semester instructing with us on the flight instructor side of the house. The flight instructors are a separate issue from faculty lines. So the faculty lines have academic requirements that they have to have along with the FAA credentials, which is that's why we all have, we've talked about hiring the right person for the right job. They've got to have the FAA credentials on both the maintenance side of the house and the flight side of the house. And they have to have the academic credentials to be able to be credentialed by SACs to teach in the classroom. So we're going to continuously need more airplanes. If we went to a self-funding model, self-sustaining model, it would put the price point out of reach for a lot of people. We would be right up there with Embry-Riddle and Auburn with our price point. So it's imperative to us to find a way to find some sort of funding model that doesn't interfere with the rest of our university and our university system of Georgia needs. Because like I talked about in my presentation, there's a lot of other needs. I mean, with COVID, everybody knows the healthcare needs out there. And so we need to find ways to fund the healthcare program. We need to find ways to fund IT, and God knows our education system needs, our education preparatory programs need funding. So if I get my funding, then they don't get their funding a lot of times, or vice versa. And I understand the process. I understand why it's done that way, but we know that aviation is a constantly evolving. The equipment is constantly advancing. So there's a constant need for upgrades. If not the aircraft as a whole, the avionics within the aircraft, and the same thing on the maintenance training side of the house. You know, we've got a lot of old antiquated airplanes that we train on, and engines, quite frankly, that have long since seen their better days, that we really need to upgrade and update. So I don't mean to be flippant with my answer about money, but it's really all about facilities, equipment, and faculty. And figuring out a way to get that funding in place where it doesn't impact the rest of the university. And I'm probably stepping way out of my lane here, but I'll find out in a minute. I mean, I just, if we're going to be honest and frank about it, I mean, that's.
You might have stepped out of lane, but we certainly do appreciate that, because I mean, all of us are here. We've been here for a while, and the chairman and many of us. You can't do it without money, and your program seems to be a little bit more expensive than our typical programs. This is my 25th, getting ready to be 26th year, and these are the three things you said you needed: equipment, faculty, and facilities.
Yes, sir.
Facilities, and this chairman knows, facilities and equipment, we can bond that. The faculty piece adds a different kind of piece, but you gotta have it, because if a pilot can make almost $200,000 a year flying a plane, why would I come and teach for they're not stupid, they fire planes. So yeah, we understand that, and I think I'm hoping that's where our committee is trying to get to.
Tal, last comment, and I'm gonna wrap this thing up.
Yeah, and I'll be quick. Back on the faculty, one great partnership, I think, is back with our industry partners. We need to talk with that, because they do have some good people that can be instructors for us. We have teamed great with Gulfstream, and some are hard to find, upholstery and trim and cabinet making, where they have actually provided the instructor for us on their dime to teach it. So I think that's something as schools we have to look at, and to go back on our industry partners as a time leading. I'm sure Delta or Gulfstream, might be willing to step up and say, hey, we have an individual we can help you out to fill in some of that time, because again, we are filling what they need an end.
So, well, look, I think the details of this whole industry are quite frankly intriguing, and I think if we've learned anything, I mean, if there's one thing we've learned, aviation is a very, very technical industry, and I think it's primarily because of FAA. Again, it goes back to safety. Everything they do is regulated by FAA, and that's why it's one of the safest transportation modes out there, if it's not the safest mode of transportation. So I think, if anything, we've brought, one thing we've done is we've brought, I think, some focus to these programs and how technical, but also how complicated they are, how expensive they are, because again, we're not working on a engine in a vehicle. We're working on maybe a multi-million-dollar jet engine, or $100,000 just piston engine, or whatever. And I may be off on the cost, but it's relative. I'll remind you also that earlier, when we left the session late in the session last year, we had a presenter, and he was in the insurance industry, but he was trying to illustrate to this committee the safety issue. And he held up a bolt, or I think it was a bolt. It may have been I think it was a bolt, but one was at the hardware store, one was, went on a helicopter. And the difference in those two was, pennies to, hundreds of dollars. and the fact that if you torque, in other words, you talk about tools and you talk about the exactness that you've got to work on these aircraft, that if you do that and we're not producing the student that torques it just right, there was a failure. Okay. And it's an illustration that I hope that will come out of this is just not a auto mechanic. I think that's also an image issue. So we got a lot of people that think you're going to go into be a mechanic at an auto, and that's what their vision is. And we have an image issue. No, this committee has toured. We've toured the facilities not only at the colleges, but we've toured the facilities at the manufacturing level and actually out at industry. And these are not those kind of jobs. So we've got an image issue. And so I think we've hopefully have opened the eyes to that. And then I also think that we need to continue with the cost and look at our cost. And that's where I hope, and we're going to have a sort of committee, talks. We're further going to ask for comment details, from not only our institutions, but also, USG and technical college system at the top to help us help you. Okay. To come up with, I guess, again, let's put options on the table. How can we help you? Whether it's tweaking things, whether we're just bringing light things that you can do within your system, or whether it's, maybe looking at an option of resources that the General Assembly may have to step up and say, hey, we want to help this also. But we're going to try to come up with a la carte menu, and I think hopefully in the committee and a report that illustrates this. And we want your buy-in. This is a partnership, and it's a partnership with our higher education institutions, the General Assembly, but most of all also with industry and with Georgia citizens. And we need to make sure that we're going to keep aviation as one of the top industries in Georgia. Not only keep it, but we're going to see it grow. We're not going to see people leave because we don't have the infrastructure and the workforce here in Georgia to keep being at the top in regards to aviation. So with that, I want to say thank you for your time. We've gone late, but I appreciate the frankness. And again, I'm going to make this comment publicly. I've asked these folks at the individual campuses to do this, and I because I want an honest conversation. So I hope you haven't overstepped your bounds. If you have and you get in trouble, please come to me. I'll try to write you a note. But anyway, thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you do for this industry in this state. And we're gonna see how we can keep Georgia #1 in business. And part of that is our aviation industry. Thank you.